Hey man, you're gonna have to let me know your name, but that video was excellent because it really it carried me through, um, literally or metaphorically. Um, it revealed um, a new space for me, and metaphor, literally in the Greek, metaphorian means to carry through, to transform an experience into um speech. And some of the metaphors that you used for the mind um, were very significant because you talked first about the mind as a tool, and I think not to imply that it has a user, right? Because we're talking about the ego here and trying to make it transparent, trying to see through it, um, and not be used by it. So really, I guess we're trying to objectify the ego in order that we could step outside of it and no longer be directed through our lives by it. And you said that you only live um, a certain amount of moments during your life conscious, and that you should or you would like to lead more moments of your life consciously. So most of our lives are unconscious, but that would mean also, wouldn't it, that we're operating egoically? Even though sometimes we interchange ego with consciousness, it seems that if you operate from the perspective of the ego, you're basically unconscious, at least in comparison to a higher state of subjectivity. Um, so you also said that the mind was basically in the head, and that sometimes we can become trapped in the mind, um, not experiencing life anymore. So we're talking about the mind as a place, right? And so certainly we shouldn't think of the mind as a place, because then we become trapped in it. So how do we think of mind? Well, maybe we should think of it in terms of time. Mind is a process of becoming. Um, Physics talks about energy. There's nothing they can tell you more about what energy is. It's just the dynamic flux of measurable material. Or at least that's what they say it is. But a lot of the quantum physicists, I gotta plug in, said that basically physics isn't telling us anymore about what energy is. It's just giving us one way of describing it. Mathematical symbols. So the physical world isn't a place either. So once we've come to acknowledge time, we can no longer think of the mind as a place, or the world as a place, as a substance, as a collection of things. The mind isn't a thing either, so really it's not a tool. So what you said, but I think what you said that for was to imply that we shouldn't be thinking of it as a tool, because then we become its tool. And there's this sense that the mind is doing gymnastics and calisthenics all the time, which is to imply that it takes a lot of effort to be lost in your intellect. Contrary to, it would be common sense to think that exercise takes more work, actual living, embodied muscular work. But really, it requires a bit more focus um, and mental energy to do philosophy. So it's not easy. It does require some aerobic activity. Um, so, we're always dealing with these dualisms: mind versus body, spirit versus life. And, if we just bring it back to energy, if there were a metaphor which science has given us about the ultimate nature of nature, it's energy. Energy is dynamic flux, a process of becoming. And I think another thing science has given us, at least our genealogical understanding of the cosmos at this point, um, is that it's basically a story which is unfolding, and new characters are continually arriving on the scene. It began as a quantum flux, and then radiation of some kind appeared, and then light appeared, and then matter appeared, and then clouds of hydrogen and helium appeared, and then stars ignited and then exploded and created new kinds of matter, new characters, new elements, and then these elements coalesced into new forms of bodies, planets, and some of these planets, with the use of these new elements, started self-organizing again, and we got cells living, metabolizing, experiencing cells, and then these cells formed communities and became multicellular animals and plants and fungi. And so we then became, the cells of the multicellular animals became hominized. They became more and more intelligent and created language and technology, and this is a developmental process that we know the history of empirically, or at least derivatively based on empirical evidence. So it's science, basically. And so knowing that this process of emergence continually is happening, that's how we should understand how these two dualisms, mind and body, or spirit and life, come together. Because there's not something called matter which we know exists independently of our subjective experience. What we call matter is part of our experience. Physicists build experiments and languages that they speak amongst one another, and so create certain paradigms, certain worlds, or ways of measuring worlds, which, a way of measuring is the production of a world. It's the discriminating of some particular aspect of what is, from the beginning or originally, an overwhelming experience of pure expression. And then, a scientific paradigm will narrow it down by devising a language and an experimental technique. So there's no matter independent of our living human activity as scientists, or as, writers, or creators, or artists of any kind. Matter has an internal component that is living. The body has an internal component, a soul. It's not separate from the body, it's just the interface of the outer. So I think this is sort of a way of placating the mind, what I've described here, this scientific story, this cosmological evolution, and it seems to quiet the mind. It seems to satisfy the mind's questions about why and what and how. And then we can start thinking about what really matters again. Not the mental life, at least not the mental life entirely, but also the spiritual, and also the worldly, our everyday lives. We need to somehow unify all of this. And, maybe this helps, maybe it doesn't, but I definitely appreciate where you allowed my mind to go in your video, so let me know if I helped you get anywhere further, and we'll go from there.